Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Today we encounter a former church musician who for a few months now has been executive director of an orchestra he's never heard, one that performs in a space he's only recently just visited.
Good morning, I'm Jeff Kellam. Welcome to this week's edition of Encounter. This morning we're going to be talking about the Binghamton Philharmonic and about its programming during the time of COVID, what its plans are ahead. Are you getting all this down?
Yeah.
Okay. And we're going to be talking with the executive director. Paul Cienniwa is the executive director, and you've been here just a matter of months.
Yes, I started in mid-April. So a great time to start.
Well, you came in at an interesting time, obviously. Tell me about what's going on with the Philharmonic. And this, of course, is not just the Philharmonic, but it's every musical performer is facing a time of non-performance in many ways.
Right. I'll begin by saying, and I think the staff here at the Philharmonic would agree, that we're all here right now for a reason. This is the best orchestra I've never heard, at least live.
Right.
But when things like this happen in life, and one is put into a circumstance that's beyond one's control, you tend to think about these things. Well, why am I here right now? And I think as the staff and board of the Philharmonic have thought, why are we here right now? And to a great extent, I feel our purpose is to keep this organization alive so that when this finite thing, it is finite.
Right.
All pandemics are finite, although some people call it a new normal. It's a new temporary. So that when we come out of here, we have an organization that can continue to provide great music for this community.
Yeah. So it must feel like you're treading water. You're not swimming.
Yes, it's challenging. And the challenges are complicated because they involve our musicians. And that is challenging on a good day because our musicians are, they're free, for the most part, freelancers. They play with multiple orchestras. In New England, we would call this an Amtrak orchestra because you find a lot of small orchestras where you'll find the same players. Well, we have a similar situation here where our players play throughout the region. Some live in New York City, others live in Pennsylvania, and so on. So, and how to work with our musicians when there's no work to offer. And at the same time, maintain an organization in its as healthy as possible so that when we are able to work at 100% capacity, we have the means to do so. Yeah. So that's been a big challenge, and it's also been challenges of talking to our audience, our sponsors, our foundations. What are we doing right now? Yeah. These are great questions.
But every orchestra in the country, in the world, is on hold.
Right.
They can find some very, very creative way to perform.
Exactly. And some have found ways through streaming concerts. And that's always the first question someone asks. Why can't I watch the Philharmonic online? Why, you should stream concerts. And the answer, which we unfortunately have, is we are a small regional orchestra. And it's very expensive to do that. Yeah. Not only the capital of the cameras and just the production process, but also the costs associated with musicians. Now, technically speaking, we don't have an agreement with our union for streaming concerts. That's something that we have not pursued. But even if we had that, we don't have a way to monetize it. We could ask our audience to as some orchestras do, say, oh, pay a ticket price and watch this on TV. Right. But we don't feel that there's critical mass to break even, because not only do we have to pay our rehearsal and performance fees, but also streaming rights, because this is a royalties issue.
Yeah, there are licensing fees for the arrangements.
Well, that's the easy part, because we normally do that. But the actual royalties for the musicians for appearing in an online, because once you put something online, it's global.
Yeah.
And so there are fee structures for that. So the question we got into when we started looking at the union agreement and even the possibility of streaming performances is, how do we want to come out of this? Because we could do that, but then we're looking at the potential of exhausting all of the resources of this organization. So when we want to get back to performing in live, will we have the ability to do that? That's been a big concern of ours. So we've spent a lot of time coming up with ways to interact with our audience that aren't through online performances. And they've been quite successful. We are, as far as we know, the only orchestra or classical music organization in the state that is doing some live performances, non-streamed.
Right.
Although I've encouraged others to do it, they don't take me up on it. And so we've put our resources into finding ways to employ our musicians in a way that meets our mission, which is building community through the power of live music. So we want to build our community, but we also want live music, but also in a way that is fiscally responsible. So when this finite thing comes to an end, we can move along.
Yeah.
Because again, we are a small, in the world of orchestras, we are a small organization.
Well, it's a small city to have a Philharmonic orchestra.
Absolutely.
And I think people perhaps come to the Forum and hear the Philharmonic play, and again, they're surprised at the level of expertise and the musical genius that they're hearing on stage.
I hear that a lot, in fact, although I haven't heard the orchestra yet. But I do hear that a lot. But think about where our musicians are coming from. They're coming from one of the most competitive markets in the country, in the world, New York City. And we have a fair share of musicians from the city, and also the Northeast as well. So we have really an abundance of riches. And so when we pull these people together, and we have a world-class maestro, we really do. Daniel Heggie is really a conductor whose reputation I knew of before coming to Binghamton. So we put that together, and I have to say, I haven't heard the Forum Theater, but we have a very nice hall. I have to say, I hadn't stepped my foot in the hall till this summer, and I went and I said, oh my goodness, what a beautiful space. Having lived in New England and performed in old vaudeville theaters, I'm not used to them being in such beautiful condition, and this is just a lovely space with a theater organ, and it's very nice. So we have this abundance of riches around us, and and not to dwell too much on preserving it, but we want to come out of this able to get going again. Yes. And when we have this around us, it's wonderful. It's great. I look forward to it.
Tell me about some of the plans now. Where are we headed with the Philharmonic?
Well, I do have to laugh a little because, our plan A was to finish this Beethoven year on December 16th, Beethoven's birthday. And we had the largest snowfall record that evening. So that would have been a real financial issue for the Philharmonic if we had to go through with that concert. Well, we couldn't have.
Right.
So it's one of those convergence moments for me. So when I started in mid-April, immediately I had to hit the ground running and say, well, we need to come up with a plan B. And we did. And we went ahead, presented an alternative season for this year, because at that time, the governor was talking about reopening New York from our being shut down. And we thought, well, maybe we can try some things. So we had some soft opening concerts, moving towards an opening in November. Well, here we are now, and those things didn't happen. We've always taken the path of taking it as it comes. We saw other organizations who just flat out canceled. But we always knew we couldn't predict the future. And of course, we're not stupid. We pay attention to what health experts are saying and so on. But if we look back, there's so much that was unsure. And this is back in late April, we were making some plans. So we have our plan B, which is the season that we are seeing in some ways dissolve before our eyes. But we're not calling it yet. Yeah, we're not going to have our January concert. But I look at our May and June concerts, they may not be what we planned, but they may be a version of those. We just don't know. So our tact has been to take it as it comes, and so on. But we've also made a plan C, and we have some plan Ds in the works too. And one of our plan C started out this summer, where we offered something that allowed us to use some of our PPP loan money. It was called Concerts in Every Corner, where we invited our musicians to give unannounced pop-up performances throughout the Tri-Cities. These were in parks, they were in school lunch pickup areas, they were at senior centers, using the best science we knew, which was play outside and, don't gather.
Yeah.
And we didn't announce them because we didn't want to create crowds. And so they were just a great way for us to connect with our community. We handed out ticket vouchers, things like this. We've done them monthly since October. And we have one scheduled for, January 23rd at the DoubleTree, and another one for February 13th. And we'll keep doing these monthly as far as we need to. Sure. So what is a social gathering concert? 50 or fewer people means that the audience is about 44 people, because we have staff members, and we invite one or two of our Philharmonic musicians who can perform masked. So we don't have oboists or trumpet players and so on. I mean, if you want to talk about orchestra members being hit at this time, it's the wind players. And let's not forget singers as well, because this aerosol issue is really concerning. So what we've presented is masked string players. We did have a concert with 2 percussionists, and it's 1 or 2 musicians. One of our cellists, Hakan Tega, who's a local star, he's our principal cellist. He did a Bach cello suite performance, so a solo performance. And these are about 50 minutes of music. We bring our audience into a church. We were at Temple Concord. We're working with DoubleTree. And these are large spaces, The churches are over 250, DoubleTree, the room is over 500, and we're bringing in 44 people. They're socially distanced. If it's a family, of course, we group them together. Everyone is wearing a mask. I say it's safer than going to a restaurant or even a church, because nobody talks at classical music concerts. Nobody's dancing around. Right. And it's a way we've been able to employ our musicians. It's a minimum, but it is something. And also engage with our audience, and we've had repeat audience members. They snap up these tickets as soon as they're available, and I can say that, big deal, they've all sold out. The first 3. At this time, I don't know if January's sold out yet, but yeah, big deal. We sell out 44 seats. But there's a desire in this community, and we have these adventurous souls who want to hear live music and know that we're going to be careful, and we follow all the guidelines. And and it's part of our commitment to live music. So we're really proud of that program. We've had some other adventures this year. One is in the summer, we received a donation of reel-to-reel tapes from the earliest days of the Binghamton Symphony Society. So this was Fritz Wallenberg's orchestra.
Right.
Now, having lived here just 9 months or so, I've become very familiar with the name Fritz Wallenberg. There's a park, the Wallenberg Park, named for Fritz and Marianne. I keep meeting people who played with the orchestra. Well, in any case, in July, I got a text message. I'm cleaning out my father's basement, and I have all these reel-to-reel tapes. So this was the son of the recording engineer who made these recordings, Marvin Kelly. And we got these. And we launched a project that we call the Wallenberg Legacy. So we've invited our public to assist financially with the digitization of these reels. We've been putting them online onto YouTube playlists. We now have over half of them digitized. Now, we're talking 20 years of recordings. And they're very good. Yeah. And I look at these recordings. We have the programs. The Marvin Kelly archived very well.
Program.
Everything's saved. Yep. So we now have the program images are digitized on our website. We have these recordings. They're very good. And the most amazing thing is that I keep meeting people who are on these recordings. And so these connections go on and on. And it is that Wallenberg legacy of Fritz and Marianne who brought this community together. And today, years later, we have this Philharmonic, which is a healthy and vibrant part of this community. So whereas we don't have the means to put our today's orchestra online, we have these recordings that have allowed us to connect digitally with our community in a way.
Yeah.
And that's just been a really exciting project. It, for me as a newcomer, a way to connect with the community, but also to just look at the programming. I mean, it's very, orchestras today cannot be this creative in the way they perform music. It's stunning.
I think that's one thing that the pandemic has taught us, is that we can start thinking outside the box. For the sake of survival, but also for the sake of creativity, that it does stretch us a little bit to say, how can we now reach our audience? How can we now provide a musical soundtrack to the darkness of this past year?
On today's Encounter program, we're talking with the executive director of the Binghamton Philharmonic, Paul Cienniwa, a former church musician.
So you've been here only for a few months, and tell me what your job is. I asked Brian, who helped set this up, whether you were a musician, because there are executive directors of arts organizations that are there because it's a business, and so their expertise is in business. But you are a musician.
I have to say that when I look at my colleagues in the executive director orchestra world, there are those with musical backgrounds, but there aren't many who've performed professionally and so on. And you often find managers who love classical music. But but my background is as a performer. My doctorate is in harpsichord performance, the most practical degree one can get. And prior to Binghamton, I was a full-time church musician in South Florida. But before that, I was in southeastern Massachusetts for 20 years, I think, in New England at least. And I performed with the Rhode Island Philharmonic as a harpsichordist, organist, and New Bedford Symphony I performed as well, and I was their chorus master, and I worked for a church in Boston, and I taught at different universities and so on. So I have a freelancer's background because the first full-time job I had was in South Florida. And after 3 years down there, I knew South Florida was not for me, and I say that after, we're recording this less than a week after 40 inches of snow.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm grateful for the snow because it's wonderful and it beats a hurricane. But I was already managing a well-established chamber music series in South Florida, and coming into orchestra management seemed to be a very natural fit for me.
Yeah.
As a performer today, even my move to Florida, of course, as a church musician, I played every week, but the actual art of really preparing recitals, I feel that I've spiritually moved on, although I do have some plans, but it's not where I find my most joy these days.
Right.
So what is my job here? What does an executive director do? Everything, really. There's an HR part of it where you're managing employees. There's a development part where you're raising money. There's audience development as well, where you're communicating with audience. You're talking to sponsors and so on, but we're also talking to our orchestra. And of course, our music director, because what's great for me about being a musician is when I talk to our music director, we can really work on program development and get excited about music together and have good conversations about repertoire that I imagine someone who's just a lover of music may not have that same knowledge. So it's great to work with Daniel and make some plans. So it's a bit of fiscal, personnel management. It's a lot of things, and I guess and board development as well. The buck stops with me, but fortunately I have really good people to work with who have been with this organization a while and really understand Binghamton and the Philharmonic.
As a church musician, you had a budget. I take it was a fairly good-sized church.
Yes.
So you were dealing with a budget. You were dealing with some personnel, although probably mostly volunteers. But did you have section leaders who were paid?
We had 12 paid singers. No, we had 8 in Florida. I had 12 in Boston. In Boston, it was a fully professional choir. But I should mention, I founded my own chamber orchestra in Newport, Rhode Island in 2003. And we were around for nearly 10 years. So this sort of performer / orchestra management is something that's been in my blood for a while. In many ways, becoming executive director of the Binghamton Philharmonic has crystallized all of these things that have been flowing through me. I mean, for instance, everyone thinks I'm nuts, but I love working on a budget. I like making it work.
You can come work on my budget anytime you like.
It's just great to see the pieces of the puzzle fit together. It's the same, to me, it's the same brain that likes to memorize a Bach fugue. When you take all these segments and you bring them together and make them work in a beautiful harmony, it's great. And then to use this part of my life to make an orchestra successful is also really great. It's wonderful. And I should say as well, you know, my wife and I interviewed for this position in February of 2020, accepted the position when it was offered a few weeks later. My wife hadn't seen Binghamton, but we drove up. It was during the shutdown, and we had this beautiful 3-day drive. We took our time. We get up here, and I was so pleased to see my wife fell in love with it instantly.
Wow.
And so we feel after those 3 nomadic years in Florida that we found a home. And so it's really exciting to be a part of the Philharmonic with this foundational understanding that I intend to steer this organization for the rest of my career. And I have that understanding because my wife won't let us move. So the success of the organization is really key. It's key to my marriage. No, but I mean, this community is outstanding. I've never seen, I mean, it is, people think I'm nuts when I say this, but I've lived in a lot of places. And this is, when I first moved here, I kept telling everyone, this is Frank Capra's dream. Frank Capra, the film director, who believed in the soul, the heart and soul of communities, and the idea of reinvestment in communities. And I see it here on a daily basis. You just look at even from a corporate standpoint, you look at the corporate sponsors behind the Philharmonic and the opera and the museums and so on, and they're not global companies, which is what I've seen in other places I live. They have roots here. Yeah. My mortgage, I sound like George Bailey, my mortgage is tied up in an organization that is a great sponsor of the Philharmonic. That's just the great thing about living in Binghamton is you have this hometown interconnectivity that one does not see in parts of the country and the world that have sold their souls to big money. Yeah. And someone might say, well, there is no big money because it's Binghamton and no one is interested. But I call that a blessing. It's a really wonderful thing. So when we talk about small business reinvesting in the community, you want to see that. This is Binghamton. I mean, this is exactly what's happening here. So for me, it's a great community to live in because I'm seeing that part of the American dream that has been lost in so many other parts of the country. It's a great place to be. And I'll say it again, the snow beats a hurricane.
Let me take a quick diversion, a quick step back to your work as a church musician. You said this is your first Christmas without programming the music of the season. So tell me about how it feels to leave that behind.
My bigger concern, I've worked as a church musician since 1994. My first part-time position, which was in Chicago, where I grew up, and then moved to New England, and so on. So I was more concerned about not working in a religious context. And I do laugh that, I'm working in a secular organization, but the assistant executive director is the granddaughter of a Methodist minister. Our operations manager is a Presbyterian, and our box office development person is a secular Jew. Right. So believe me, we talk about religion all the time. And they are a bit younger than me, so the conversations are invigorating and very interesting. So I was more concerned of leaving the church music world, but I got to say, my wife and I found a wonderful church community almost immediately after coming here. We haven't met anyone because it's online, but it's crazy to me. Back to the Frank Capra-ness of this community is that here we've been attending online church, can I make a plug? Trinity Memorial Episcopal. And just through their online services, seeing names of people that I've now encountered through my work with the Philharmonic and in the community. So again, it's that there's a web that's woven through this community that is very powerful. So my concerns about not being a church musician are relieved by feeling that I'm still doing, well, I dare say, God's work in a secular context, and it's good. But as far as Christmas goes, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I don't have to do Christmas. This is going to be my first Christmas where I don't have to get up in the morning. I don't have to go out on Christmas Eve. I mean, I'd love to go to a service, but I don't want to do 3 of them. Right. And I don't want to contract singers and musicians for a Christmas Eve prelude. No, I'm so happy.
Now that we've entered a new year, well, all the best to you and your new position. And I can't wait for you to hear your orchestra. I can't wait for you to hear it in the Forum. But in the meantime, mention once again the 2 concerts which are coming up.
January 23rd and February 13th. I should mention as well that we also have our annual Mac and Cheese Fest, which we almost called Mask and Cheese Fest. This is our major fundraiser. But this year it is on February 18th. We're doing as a drive-up pickup event out of the Forum Theater. So we have people coming to the Forum. We can't keep them in there, but we have right now we have at least 12 restaurants participating, and people can place their order, and then they go home, they taste their mac and cheese, and they can vote online and so on. So it's a little bit like what we've done in other years, but it's a way to keep the spirit up at this time. So it's great fun.
Our last question would be, where can we find more information about the social concerts or about the Binghamton Philharmonic in general?
Sure, the best place to look is binghamtonphilharmonic.org, our website.
Great. Thank you so much for your time today. I've enjoyed the conversation. It's good to get to know you, and I will see you again. I'm sure.
Very good. Thank you.
This week's guest on Encounter was Dr. Paul Cienniwa, who is Executive Director of the Binghamton Philharmonic. This is Jeff Kellam reminding you that Encounter programs are available through the Broome County Council of Churches website at broomecouncil.net. I hope in the coming new year you will be gentle with people and with yourself.